This week on public versus private organizations, I'm going to be talking about public utilities versus private electricity, such as Edison. So public utilities could be any major city, Los Angeles, Department of Water and Power, Riverside Public Utilities. It could be any larger city or even a county that provides their water, electricity, gas, or other services to the citizens, rather than a private entity like the majority of us here in Southern California use Southern California Edison. My thesis is that public utilities in Edison are different in the unimportant respects of equity, accountability, and efficiency. Now, accountability, also public administration dichotomy, really is different in between the two agencies, because in Edison they have shareholders, where in public utilities we have taxpayers. They both have a stake in the company per se, but there's very different ways of being held accountable. In private business, Edison, they are held to the bottom line. They use different ways to drop their profit or their expenses and increase their profit margin. Where on the public utility side, that is not a concern. It is more of a concern of providing the best service to the taxpayers at a level that the taxpayers actually want. Also, the department heads are completely different. Private sector can have multiple CEOs that come and go on a regular basis, versus city council that are elected to terms. And this is really where Graham Allison starts to kind of use his points that say that they're different when he talks about how fast a private organization's management system has a turnover rate. It's very quick, versus the public where, like I said, we have terms. And we could tie that back to Woodrow Wilson's dichotomy with the separation of administration and the politics side, where the administration is executing these rules, and let's just call them the rates, in this case for these businesses or this agency, versus the maybe the CEOs directing how much they're going to charge to increase their profit margins. They have corporate boards versus a city council, and they also use CEOs. So they're similar in the sense that some of those are elected. The board does elect CEOs, but they're different in the sense of why and how they're held accountable. And in public administration, we can really see a difference where we are held accountable on the public side to a much higher standard as far as wages, benefits, and things like that. And that kind of goes into equity, which is our next point, because really it's a difference between bureaucracy and the bottom line. And we can really talk about, Weber when we look at this, because on the public side, we're looking at bureaucracy. We're looking at how are we delivering this electricity or this power or this water or this gas? How are we manufacturing it? How are we charging for it? And all of that is tied up in how much money is the going rate? How much does it cost to actually produce it? And how much does it cost to pay the employees who are doing it? Versus you look at Edison, and they're looking at how much money they're making for their company, how much money are they making for their shareholders. So really, this difference in bureaucracy versus a private business, which is really only there to make money. That's their job. So we have a lot of different rules and regulations, checks and balances. But what really separates, the public versus the private is really going down to how they do what they do. So it comes down to efficiency. And we're looking at the difference between basically technology and maybe budgeting, because money talks. In this case, we're looking right at Taylor. I mean, he's coming up with things that they share in common, such as, a chain of command or span of control, reporting to one person. And that really helps for the efficiency of an organization. Public, private, doesn't matter. But really the difference is the money. And now Taylor argues that there's a one best way to do things, which we'll say Edison chooses that one best way. But the difference between public and private in this situation is that a public agency, being as big as they are, having those rules because we have accountability, having to be equitable because all of the department heads are really focused on, employee relations, employee rights, benefits, which is really one of Graham Allison's major differences that he argues, is that the heads are actually focused on, more employee related issues, rather than in a private company, the CEOs are worried about money. So really this is where it comes to a fork in the road, because your public budgeting system is really what is guiding the public utilities here. How much money have we allocated to spend? How much money are we going to make? And how much money are we going to charge or keep in a reserve? And all of that is done on a yearly basis. So we're far less efficient than, say, Edison, a private company that can make a change like that tomorrow if they needed to, because they found a new piece of equipment or technology that has improved the efficiency of, let's say, the power line grid. And they said, you know what? Spending some money and buying this piece of equipment is going to increase our profit margin over the next year. We're going to buy it today, and we're going to put it in today. Versus public utilities, in order to spend that money, depending on where you are, it has to go to a council vote, has to be approved, and then once it's approved, you have to get purchase orders. Usually you have to pull 3 bids. There's a large bureaucratic process involved in purchasing large items like that. So efficiency as far as your product that you're producing, the management, making changes with human relations, because on the public side, they have to work a lot with labor unions. And they do in the private, but they're heavily tied to that relationship on the public side. So really efficiency is a major separation between the private versus public, or in this case, Edison versus public utilities. So in conclusion, yes, they are different, but they do both accomplish the same goal. They're both delivering power or water or gas, whatever the utility is, to the customer, but they are going about it in very different ways. And we can look at the background with our public administration, seeing that although our bureaucratic process is slow, it does have positives in the fact of keeping rates lower. They are typically lower in the public utilities versus, say, private utilities like Edison. They are usually more fair to their employees, you could say, in the sense of having the same labor relations as other city departments. And on the grand scheme of things, we can look at, yes, they do share similarities between having an organized system, like what Taylor would say, for chain of command, or doing the one best way of accomplishing a task. But the differences are very stark when it comes to actually making changes, how efficient they are, and really the differences in accountability when we look at the two organizations as a whole.